For those of you that don't know, this is the largest new park in London outside the Olympics for decades. I won't take you through the history that got us to this point, but it was a hard-won outcome that we have this park. There were ongoing discussions about what happened in the future. The last administration had an option to own and left it for councillors to decide, when that option came forward, what they would do. So, given the park's scale, personally, I always thought it was inevitable that the council would adopt the park. That option finally arrived on the 22nd of August 2022. Surprisingly, the administration has sat on this decision without mentioning it to us as ward councillors for the best part of a year, but we now have a paper and the council can buy the park for £1. Its 32 acres are worth an untold amount of money, and I can say untold quite safely because the paper doesn't tell us how much it's worth. What it does say, surprisingly again, is that we shouldn't buy it, and then next to nothing on what will happen next. So I'm here tonight representing three groups of my ward residents. Those who are looking forward to using the park for the rest of their lives, as a reward for all the building and construction that they've had to put up with. Members of sports clubs who still hope for playing fields and facilities that would relieve pressure elsewhere that I'm sure you're all aware of in your own wards. And the third group are leaseholders on the Springfield site who are worried about the service charges, including those in affordable housing. So, reading through this paper, the overriding factor behind the recommendation seems to be cost. Now, obviously I understand that, but there are things that need to be weighed against that. The first is that this cost wouldn't come for at least 5 years. It's not out of proportion with other parks. In fact, it's specifically calculated on the basis that it is in proportion with costs in other parks. It's not hard to fund either. It's not a huge amount. It's just a question of priorities. In fact, if the council took ownership, we could even rejig the Section 106 pot, which still has millions left in it, to fund it for much longer than 5 years. And all of our other parks draw on alternative sources of capital funding. Most importantly, there is absolutely no guarantee on what happens after 5 years, much less 25 years or 100 years. The legal agreements specify what had to be delivered for the opening, but ultimately, who decides is who owns. By not owning the park, you're putting the councillor's faith in a developer. It will be for the developer and the trust to decide the basis on which the park is run, by whom, whether the council even gets a seat on the board, and which leaseholders pay for it, and others. The paper specifically says a developer could choose to pile these costs onto residents and affordable housing and social rent properties. There are lots of words in this paper, like currently and intention. There is no certainty. The most damning quote in paragraph 12, the arrangements as to how the applicant does this and whether it passes on any or all of the costs are entirely a matter for the applicant and not for the council. It will be outside of the council's control. So, just imagine the reverse of this. Imagine a proposal to sell Battersea Park to a developer for £1 with no agreed funding and justifying it by saying, but this would save us some ordinary normal running costs in 5 years' time, and don't worry, we wouldn't own it anymore, but we've got some legal agreements and a social value brochure. You'd rightly laugh that out of the room. I thought this new administration believed in public ownership. It's what Councillor White has been telling me for all this years. It's what you said when you opposed even leasing out sports facilities on some of our parks with genuine guarantees, commitments and fallback provisions. This is your opportunity to buy the largest new park in London for £1, to secure it as a public asset, run for the public benefit. That chance is seized now, or it's lost forever. Please, don't leave us without our park and owning the consequences.
Go ahead.
As I was mentioned, it's great to hear that you're now very suspicious of developers, having spent the last 5 years telling us how wonderful they are and that they deliver everything that they tell us to deliver. So now you're quite suspicious of developers. That's a sea change, and that's we welcome your movement on that. And I have my own suspicions as well. I have my own problems with this over that. But your involvement, this is in your ward, isn't it? Can you tell me how many Springfield community forums you've attended over the last, since you became a councillor?
I've certainly attended 2 or 3 at every Springfield forum. One of the 3 ward councillors has been present, I believe, on our side. So we've always had somebody there. It's just divvied up. Turning to your wider points, I mean, I trust developers as far as they're required to do things and within a reasonably short time frame. I don't trust developers over 25, 50 years when the agreements are vague. And they genuinely may not be able to fund this. And their own leaseholders on that site may turn around to them and say, we're not prepared to pay for this. And there are no agreed structures in place. There's nothing in here that guarantees anything at all. So, yes, if it's trusting the developer to deliver the park and open it, completely. If it's trusting them to maintain it to the standards that we would expect in 10, 15, 20, 30 years' time, when they could have sold it on and sold it on again, absolutely not. And I don't think you do. And the question is why you're leaving that possibility open.